Hi, hello there. Welcome or welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is JJ and I love wrestling. And yes, I am coming to you in this video barefaced. I am still in my pajamas. I recorded this video last night at 1 in the morning and I decided to redo it because I sounded crazy. And so I literally just jumped out of bed and started filming. So please be kind. What I want to talk to you about today, as you could see by the title of the video, is I just want to have a little unscripted talk about the state of wrestling, quote-unquote, journalism. Right now, before I jump into some of my thoughts, I have to share two, I think, important facts for transparency. The first is that I am a professional journalist who is also a trained journalist. I studied journalism at NYU. I also have been working professionally as a journalist, as a writer, since 2006. And what I mean by that is for the last 20 years of my life, I have been able to pay my housing costs, feed myself, and live one way or the other through my writing, whether that is as a professional journalist who's doing what you think of as traditional journalism, whether that is through being a professional contract freelance writer, so I write the things that you read day to day, you just don't know I've written them, or whether that is in my capacity as a political educator, community organizer, which is how I spend my 9 to 5 when I'm not here with you talking about wrestling. So I'm sharing these thoughts from the perspective of someone who, yes, has a channel side project where I talk about and love wrestling, but also as someone in my 9 to 5 who has extremely rigorous journalistic standards for the journalism, the writing, and the work that I do, because I am a trained professional journalist, and the content that I cover when I'm doing journalism is things like sex crimes and war and political corruption, etc. And so it is a very traditional and rigorous space in journalism. As a writer, the writing that I actually get the most money to do is writing grants for nonprofits. And so everything has to be rooted ultimately in provable fact, right? And so though I have done creative writing, approach the concept of journalism as a word that has a very specific meaning. Now, saying that, the second caveat I will share with you is that I do not consider myself to be a wrestling journalist yet, because of that rigorous definition I hold for what it is to call yourself a journalist. Now, it is not new by any means for there to be wrestling dirt sheets. I think with how immensely widespread and popular all different kinds of social media are, it is becoming way, way, way easier to say that you are a wrestling journalist. And it is very easy to, with great immediacy but very little ethics, fire off tweets and stories and posts about third and fourth hand conjecture that isn't rooted in fact, and then spread that out to an audience that you know is going to pick it up and then regurgitate it. Now, this isn't an attack on any specific platform, writer, or entity, because I don't need to name them. You know who they are. But it is extremely frustrating to watch some of these quote-unquote wrestling journalists who all they do every week is get on their Twitter or get on their website and they just publish absolute fucking nonsense, fake facts that are not rooted in any primary sources. So let me explain that to you. In my news journalism, if I am covering a story, say for example, last summer I covered a multi-part story about a church in Minnesota whose pastor was involved in sex crimes, and in doing that I had to conduct primary interviews. And that means that I reached out to the people who worked at the church. I reached out to this pastor's family. I reached out to those who were known to be victims. And I got their actual statements. I asked them directly what was what. Even when it makes you unpopular, even when it is difficult to do, even when you then have to wait to publish your story because you're waiting for primary and secondary sources to actually get back to you with a legitimate statement. And that is the crux and the problem of what I call yellow journalism, but which you might know as tabloid journalism, which is what I think probably 90% of wrestling journalism websites are. They are tabloids. There is no rigorous fact checking. Their sources are literally anyone who shoots them a DM online, and I guarantee you most of the time they are not even verifying these people say they are who they are or have any sort of internal connection that they're claiming to have. When I receive a tip from someone off the record, I still require them to send me a picture of their ID and some form of proof that I do not share that claims they are who they say they are. So if they claim to be a family member, I require family photos. If they say they're a former and current employee, I require they send me a pay stub or a contract or some sort of document that proves to me that they work for that company. Why? Because when you're presenting the news to people, whether it's about wrestling or the Iran war, people are relying on you to tell them the truth. They're relying on the fact that because you are presenting yourself as a journalist, you did the part, the legwork, the research, the fact-checking, the interviewing, the sourcing, okay, to be able to fully understand all sides of this situation to then present it to you as a consumer of the news. And that is not the rigorous process that is happening in wrestling journalism. I would say 50% of the journalism that is suggested to me here on YouTube and other places is mostly just people making angry, ranting videos about hating WWE or hating AEW or hating women's wrestling or hating whatever they're hating this week, because that is how they make their money, by rage baiting you and clickbaiting you with fake news headlines for unverified stories that they've quite literally made up. Now, this came to a head for me this weekend in their situation with AEW wrestler Anna Jay. And this is not a unique situation, but one tabloid dirt rag that has a massive following decided to publish a completely unverified story about Anna Jay's contract being canceled, or that Anna Jay wasn't in AEW anymore, or that Anna Jay didn't even know if she was ever going to wrestle again, and Tony Khan was playing games. Just published a complete shitwad of sourced tips and information, right? Published that out, and then every single second and third rate fucking content mill wrestling channel and wrestling page and wrestling Instagram account could not even wait 1 minute to then regurgitate that story out to all of their followers. And in the course of about 3 days, I started seeing almost every single wrestling channel reporting that Anna Jay had no contract, that her time with AEW was over, that she didn't even know what her future was going to look like. To the point Anna Jay herself had to come out and make a statement, make a video saying to everyone, this isn't true. And week after week after week, I see this exact same pattern, where these people with these massive followings will make something up because it's a slow news day, or they'll literally pull a dusty, shitty tip out of the annals of their DMs from some rando and decide to run with it. Or they'll get a little incentive from one of the wrestling promotions they're on good terms with to drop a anonymous tip or reveal an anonymous story. You see this happen all the time with WWE, and don't be in my comments acting like a hater. I do PR for money professionally for entities, and That is what you do in PR. You release tips to friendlies, which is what you call a publishing entity that you have a good working relationship with that will cover you with positive bias. You give that information to your friendlies so that they can pivot it for you. They can sell it for you the way you want, right? So when a big story will come out about something really terrible that's happening in a wrestling promotion, and then all of a sudden these inside tips will start flooding in about, well, this is what actually happened and this is why it actually happened. That is straight up PR happening. That is manipulation of the press, manipulation of social media in order to make you think that you're on the inside of some knowledge that you only know because they've released it for you to know. Okay, so they will then publish whatever story, whatever tip that media or conglomerate or promotion wants them to share because they want to stay on good terms and have access to those wrestlers. They want to continue to get those sweet backstage passes and media badges to be able to go and cover this kind of wrestling. Okay, you cannot trust these people. I'm not saying all of them, but I'm saying a great majority of them. You need to be reading absolutely everything they publish with a boulder of salt, because it is very, very rarely accurate or verified information. And we see this because they'll put out these stories, and within 48 to 72 hours, they've been proven to be 100% completely false. Okay, and you should not have to see a wrestler like Anna Jay have to get on and do a live stream and say to you, stop listening to these assholes because they're making shit up, they don't know what they're talking about, and yet you then will continue to propagate these rumors and these bullshit clickbait stories because for some reason you trust a man in his basement typing up stories about wrestling more than you trust the words out of the mouths of the wrestlers themselves. It makes no sense. This is unethical journalism at its peak because they do not care about the impact that it has on the real life people they are covering. When you're going through a contract negotiation or you're trying to determine what your next step is in a promotion and you're trying to weigh out the pros and the cons of what your options are, and then Dirt Sheet Jones comes in and publishes 15 fake fucking unverified stories about how you're a bad worker or you're difficult to negotiate with or they're not going to offer you a contract or the fans don't want to see you stay, that has a delirious detrimental effect on these people's lives and their careers. And I personally think it is disgusting. Now, I go after, in my journalism, in my other life, my real life, I go after politicians who've committed sex crimes, right? I go after warmongers, okay? I report on people who legitimately send me death threats because that is part of what journalism, real journalism, is. It is a commitment, above all else, to the pursuit of the truth, even when it puts you in danger, even when it makes you unpopular. Even when it means you don't get nice kisses on the cheek and pats on the back from those who hold power because they know that you're not going to lie for them. For me, that is what makes a journalist. It is someone who is willing to stand in the cracks between what is known to be true and what is actually true, and being willing to dig into that in order to share it with you, so that you are more informed and more prepared to handle your daily life. Wrestling journalism is a little bit different, right? Because good wrestling journalism relies on the same tenets of all modern journalism, right? And they do their due diligence in actually fact-checking, sourcing stories, even if it means they're not going to report on that story for 3 or 4 days after it's gone around social media, because they're committed to telling you the truth. Let me be so blunt with you. There has never been a time on our earth where you have more immediate access to these wrestlers, their managers, the heads of the promotions, the people who work backstage, ring announcers, marketing people. There is endless access virtually to these folks that you can, on 100 different platforms, reach out to them through a direct message or an email and simply say, this is something that I'm hearing. Is it true? Do you have a statement? But I want you to recognize how often, when you read legitimate news, you will read in there where the person has reached out to so and so. I've reached out to this entity for a statement. They've not yet responded. Then I want you to look at how often, when you're reading these dirt rag wrestling tabloids, how often in there do they tell you, we reached out to so and so to get a statement and they didn't respond to us? Very rarely. And it's because they're not doing that. They're not doing that. I have off-the-record sources too, but I'm still able to tell you, as part of that, what their connection is to the story, so you know I'm not making this shit up. I don't cover wrestling news. I like to talk about matches I like, wrestlers I like, promotions I like. I like to talk about the art and the science of wrestling itself, the storytelling, the components of character work, what appeals to me as a professional writer. That's the kind of wrestling content I like to make. I don't make yet wrestling news content because I don't yet feel like I have the sources and the connections inside to be able to appropriately do that for you. Now, promotions that I am developing relationship with, where I do talk to some of the wrestlers or I do talk to some of the people who work there, I am not ever going to exploit those relationships or those connections in order to then come here and make up lies and bullshit about them so you click on my video. I'm never going to do it because it violates the ethics of journalism. Clickbait, rage bait, misinformation bait, all of these things violate the ethical tenets of journalism. And that is why your favorite wrestling journalist is not one. And that's okay. That's okay. I come on here, I don't expect for you to look at me and think, wow, what a fine wrestling journalist. One day, when I am able to travel to these promotions and go behind the scenes and cut interviews with people that are genuine, and I'm able to bring you primary sourced material, which is material that I only know because I went and directly got it from the direct person who was able to give it to me, then I will not consider this to be a wrestling news or a wrestling journalism space. I am a professional journalist who pays 100% of my bills through writing and journalism, but I am not a wrestling journalist, and it is inherently disrespectful for me to pretend in this space that I am one when I do not yet have those connections and those opportunities. That is why I think your wrestling dirt rag, your favorite one you love to turn to, is probably doing some of the most egregious harm to the wrestling space because of modern social media than you could ever imagine behind the scenes. And that's kind of my thoughts on it. That's kind of my thoughts on it. And I won't even dive into, there is an especially egregious area of this tabloid wrestling journalism that is 100% solely focused on sexualizing female wrestlers, talking about who they're dating, who they're having sex with, if they're making OnlyFans, making AI-generated images of them in lingerie, and then sharing those things with AI-generated facts about these wrestlers as though you're making content that uplifts, respects, or brings dignity to the people doing the wrestling. You're not a journalist. You make memes. You're not a journalist. You make up stories and then you write them out and you tweet them to the world. You're not a journalist because someone who knows someone who knows someone who knows someone went to an AEW show and overheard a friend say that maybe someone wasn't going to sign a new contract. You're not a journalist. You're spreading gossip. You're churning rumors, okay? And all of this is about you making money and you being seen as someone that CEOs and promotion heads and wrestlers have to be afraid of so they can continue to give you perks and access. Because if they don't, you have no problem coming online and making up straight fucking lies about them and then publishing it to your entire platform. And then because so many of these other wrestling journalists are literally just leeches who take other people's work and then retweet it with one or two new sentences because they think they're breaking the news to you by stealing someone else's work. This is where we are now. This is where we are now. And this is not new. When back in the day, if you were getting the literal newsletters in the mail, if you were calling the wrestling hotlines to find out wrestling news, the things we had to do back in the day before we were on the internet, then you know this isn't new, okay? This has always been a symptom of wrestling. And I think it's incredible that any single person who loves wrestling can come on here and set up a tripod and tell you why they love wrestling or share their thoughts with you on wrestling. And I think it's really cool when folks in the community come together and they say, hey, here's a thing that's happened. Let's speculate about why that might be or what might happen next, while making it extremely clear to you as a viewer that they're just talking out of their neck, that they're just saying, hey, this is just us riffing on something that might happen. We don't actually know internally what we're talking about. All of that is okay. All of that is beautiful. All of that is part of the joy of being in the wrestling community, is being able to make and share that space with each other. But we need to stop elevating and uplifting these wrestling journalists who have absolutely no respect, nor dignity, nor care for the wrestling itself or for the wrestlers that they're covering in these rags. These are real living human people. I tell you this at least every other second video probably, that over here I have great reverence and great respect for these professional athletes who are putting everything on the line, their bodies, their lives, their reputations, their relationships, to be able to chase and pursue this amazing passion, which is wrestling, and to do it for us. And to then, no matter how rude or disgusting or ignorant or entitled or ungrateful we act, continue to show up, to continue to put in the work, continue to try to engage with us on social media, continue to try to go to fan events, even though they know there are going to be at least 60% of the people who are going to act disgusting towards them, right? And take any little thing they do or say and turn it into content. These are human beings. These are human beings. I absolutely have wrestlers in my DMs. Have you ever heard me come on here and say, this is some secret information I got from behind? No, I don't do that. Because I respect the people who reach out to me to talk about wrestling, or to talk about their career, or to talk about a project they have coming up, or to say, hey, it's cool that you're talking about this. I respect those relationships that are being built, because for me, as someone who understands that the only way you can critically respond to and report on truth is by honoring how sacred those relationships are and doing the work to build them. Who knows, maybe in a year you'll see me standing backstage at a wrestling promotion with a microphone interviewing someone about breaking news. I have on my other channel covered the sex crimes, human trafficking allegations, child rape allegations, absolute lack of any formal labor rights, contract discrepancies that have happened at promotions like WWE. I've talked about that on my other channel, where I talk about news and politics and can break those things down for you. I don't talk about it here. That's not what you come here for, that in my understanding. That's it. This was a ramble. I knew it was going to be a ramble. I don't even know if any of you will watch this, but I just wanted to share some of those thoughts out there with you, and I would love to know what you think. Do you read wrestling tabloids? Do you look at wrestling journalism? Do you still go to like the big three websites that do this kind of journalism? Or do you find yourself getting more engaging more with like people here, like small YouTube channels or Instagram accounts, etc.? I would love to know where you get your wrestling information. And also I would love to know, do you wish I covered more wrestling news? Because I'm not opposed to giving wrestling news or talking about big stories that other people are talking about, like the New Day leaving. I'm not opposed to doing that. It's just because of my standards, I am a little more rigorous when I'm going to report something like that. And so I want to take my time to make sure I'm telling the truth. So, yeah, let me know. I would love to know what your thoughts are. I feel incredibly lucky and incredibly humbled to be able to come here and make this space and talk about wrestling with you all and share that love with you all. Because I do truly love wrestling. And I know that my subscribers, because we interact with each other in my community tab, you love wrestling too. And I'm trying so hard not to create an environment over here that is toxic or rooted in rage bait or rooted in just beating up on people or tearing people down when they're just trying to chase their dream. I think that we have a sacred role in the wrestling community as the keeper of these stories. And when I sit down and I spend 12 hours working on a script about who I think are the 15 most influential tag teams of all time from across the whole world over the last 40 years, it's because I love wrestling. And I think it is an absolutely sacred honor to get to collect and keep those stories and share them with you. And I really think that at the end of the day, we all need to take a moment and remember why we started watching wrestling, why we started admiring these wrestlers in the first place, what keeps us coming back. And for me, it's because wrestling represents hope. It represents the idea that you can still work hard and chase a dream and be revered for it. It gives me hope that you can still cheer for the good guy and they're going to still be the good guy, or that when you're having a hard time and you feel like the world is ripping you apart, that you have a space where you can go and you can cheer for the bad guy and still feel safe and still feel good about that. This is such a beautiful world. And I think we are all so honored to be a part of it. And any single time a wrestler reaches out to me and says thank you, that means everything to me. My name's JJ, and I love wrestling. And I'm glad you're here. And I think we all need to just do a little bit better for these wrestlers. I'll see you in the next one.